Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can see me and hear me clearly. This is the ADHD Cutie. For those who don't know, if you're new to the channel, welcome. This is all about everything ADHD for, especially for single Black moms, Black women, because we are just so underrepresented when it comes to this topic. Today, I would like to share with you my untold story as an undiagnosed new single mother. My journey began May 20th. That's when my son was born. He was 2 months early and he weighed only 2.5 pounds. So he ended up spending a little over a month in the intensive care unit. But his birth itself was just a journey. The pregnancy itself was just a journey. I was sick every single day. It wasn't just morning sickness for a couple of months, it was every single day. And then when it got to the 7th month, I started having these really bad pains. And I was under the care of a midwife. I had chosen a midwife because I was so afraid of having my baby in the hospital. I wanted to do certain things. I wanted to be able to have choices, and most hospitals don't want to give you that. I knew the midwife would. I knew she would honor my wishes and request. But God and the baby had other plans. So I was rushed to the hospital, 7 months, and it was like my biggest fear had come true because I was so afraid of having my baby in the hospital. But God knew that. He knew that. So he put everything in place for me because the midwife knew the nurse that ended up taking care of me. She knew the neonatologist that was the specialist who took care of my baby. They all knew each other. God had already put his angels in place. Even during the birth, my blood pressure had gone so high they had to induce labor. My legs had swollen up so big it wasn't even funny, almost about as thick as this bottle. No joke, both legs. So I was in the bed. When the morning that they induced labor, it wasn't long at all. That night, he was ready to come. And when I say he was quick, the lady who was with me went out to smoke a cigarette. By the time she came back, Isaiah was coming. Isaiah was like, I'm not waiting. I've been up in this shell long enough. It's time to go. Let's go. Woo-hoo! And that is exactly how he came out. Flying down the birth canal like the boy was on a water slide, okay? Swoosh. Woohoo! Mm-mm. The nurse had to practically jump and almost fell trying to catch him so he wouldn't fall on the floor. That's how fast it came. And he has been nonstop ever since. My blood pressure was still high. So to me, the experience of the birth was totally different from what it was. To me, all I could see was a white light. My midwife was there. She looked like an angel, and she was just stroking my hair and telling me everything was okay. Don't worry, everything is okay. Your baby will be fine. But as I could hear people talking, but I couldn't open my eyes. I could hear them say, don't push. I could hear them say, the cord is wrapped around his neck. I could hear them say, he's not breathing. I could hear them working on him, trying to get him to breathe once he did come out. I could hear myself saying, why isn't my baby crying? What's going on? What's wrong with him? And I could hear them say, we're losing her. We're losing her. Get the crash cart. I thought I was dreaming. I really did. I was like, this cannot be happening. This can't be happening. This has to be a dream. And so it was real. It was real. And again, God has sent his angels. That white room that I was seeing, there is no white room in that hospital. That was God. I know that just like I know my name. Like I said, my baby spent a little over a year, a little over, excuse me, a little over a month in intensive care. I stayed in the hospital after birth for about 3, 4 days. For 3 days, I was not able to see him. I was not able to hold him, touch him, feed him, nothing, because I was too sick to get out of bed. But he was too sick for them to bring him to me. And by the third day, I was like, look, you all need to figure out something because one way or another, I am going to see my baby. I have talked to him every day since he was conceived. I've sang to him, I've rubbed my belly and touched him. I've got to get to my baby. So of course, we got to check with the doctors. Okay, you check with the doctors. I've already checked with my father. He said I'm gonna see my baby today, so you all work that out. So I got to see him, and I just cried. I just cried because he could literally fit in the palm of my hand. That's how small he was. He looks so frail, almost like an alien. And I prayed and I said, God, what did I do? What did I not do? What did I do? Is this a punishment for me having a baby out of wedlock? And if it is, please don't punish him. Just punish me, but please don't punish my baby. And so God said, he is a miracle. And I have plans for both of you. So I said, okay. And I made a promise right then and there to God. I said, well, if you can get us both home safely and out of this predicament, I will do whatever it is I need to do. I will do whatever you tell me to do. I will be obedient. I finally got to see my baby. They let me bathe him, feed him. So every day after that, I would get out of bed and go and bathe him and go and feed him. And he had to be fed every 2 hours. And the hospital allowed me to do that. The day before I checked out, they actually let me take him out of the incubator that he was in. And I actually got to hold him for the first time. It was short, but I got to touch him. I got to hold him close to me. They even let me breastfeed him. Breastfeeding, again, that was a struggle by itself because I was so sick, I wasn't able to get to him, so my milk dried up. I cried and cried and cried about that. I'm like, okay, come on, God. You gave me this baby to take care of. He needs so much. I'm trying, but what I need to give him, I don't have. God said he'll provide. And he did. The hospital had formula, they had bottles. I didn't want him to have that, but it is what it is. I was able to pump just enough to give him something. And that's what the doctor said. Whatever you can pump, give it to him. He needs those nutrients right now. I don't care if it's a few drops, give it to him. And that's what I did. Every 2 hours, that's what I did. The day came when I got discharged from the hospital. And For me, that was the worst day of my life. Having him and going through that experience was the scariest. But having to leave that hospital without my baby in my arms was the worst experience in the world. Any mother who has experienced that knows exactly what I'm talking about. It took me the longest time to actually leave the hospital because I just couldn't do it. And I would sit down and cry in the lobby and I would go to the door and leave and I just couldn't. I can't leave my baby in the hospital. Like I can't. I managed to get to the car, got to the car and I broke down again and I cried so hard. I had the engine running and I had to turn it off because I was crying so hard I couldn't see, much less try to drive. I know I sat in that parking lot for about a good 30 minutes. That was stress and anxiety for me that I didn't need because my blood pressure was still kind of funky. So I had to be careful with that. My anxiety was at an all-time high because I couldn't see my baby all day like I used to when I was in the hospital. I didn't know what they were doing. I couldn't see what they were doing. Were they taking care of him? Were they treating him with respect or were they just tossing him around like a sack of potatoes? I didn't know. I couldn't see. And that was killing me. I never dreamed that I could love that baby so much because I had no plans of having a baby out of wedlock. I definitely hadn't planned on having a baby at 36. Yeah, I was 36 then. And so I made it home. And as soon as I got home, I called the hospital to check on him, see how he was doing. And I would call them every hour to see how he was doing. I had to recover and get myself together before I could go back to the hospital and see him because I couldn't drive with my blood pressure being so high. So I was able to do that, and whatever little pumping I could do, I would do that. Take it up to the hospital when I could get up there, and I would stay for hours and hours and hours. I would go home when visiting hours are over, and they were nice enough to let me stay maybe like an hour, hour and a half after visiting hours. And I would go home and I would just cry. That is like the worst feeling in the world to go home and not be able to take your baby home. I can't even describe that. Only a mother who has been through that can possibly understand what I'm talking about. It was my faith. You hear me? It was my faith that got me through all of that. It was my faith that got me through years after that, dealing with him as a baby because he had serious reflux. He had apnea. I went when it was actually time to take him home, he had a breathing episode. Some Something told me to go to the hospital and see if I could stay overnight the night before I was supposed to take him home. And they said yes. As I was getting ready for bed, they let me have him in the room with me. I laid my clothes out, and it doesn't take long to, it wasn't even a minute. I took my eyes off of him to lay my clothes off, and I turned around. He had stopped breathing. Bells and whistles were going off in that hospital like there was a 911 emergency worldwide. But the nurses and doctors were on it. They were in that room so quick, working on him. And so, of course, they were like, well, we're going to have to keep him here till we get him stabilized and blah, 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 blah. So that was another 3 weeks I had to wait. And when I was finally able to take him home, I had to go through a lot of training and get a lot of special equipment and all of that. One of the main things I had to do was go through CPR for infants and children, CPR and first aid. God worked that out. I got in touch with one of the head directors in Florida. I was living in Florida at the time, not Orlando, but it was another part of Florida. I got in touch with one of the directors who was teaching a class, and she taught a crash course on Saturday that lasted all day long. I was able to get into that class and took CPR and first aid so I could bring my baby home. She knew the situation because the hospital had set it all up for me. So she knew the situation. And she said to me before I left, she said, "This is very serious. Your baby is very sick. So I'm going to put a special code in the 911 system so that if you ever call 911 for that baby, they will be at your door before you hang up the phone." Did you hear me? Anybody who ever called 911 know daggone well they don't work that fast, ever. And so I asked her, I was like, "Are you sure about that?" She said, "Yeah, the code I put in, trust me, they'll be at your door before you hang up the phone. So you make sure when you call 911, you really need 911." That was like an aha moment to really bring it home to me just how serious his condition was. And then it put fear in me that I was taking this baby home. I would be home alone. I wouldn't have the support of the nurses and doctors. I couldn't push a button and have somebody come run in the room and help me. It was all up to me and God. But little did I know that God had already had a system, a support system put in place for me. My coworker friend who rushed me to the hospital when I went into early labor, Lori Gemmell. She was a big part of helping me get through that. I had a neighbor friend who stepped in to help. The nurse who helped deliver him, she took us in like we were her adopted family. The midwife stayed in touch. And I was put in touch with a special support group for mothers of preemie babies. So I took my baby home. For the first month, he was not allowed to go anywhere. He could not be outside, period. And then I had to figure that out. Okay, I've got to get him food and diapers. And how am I going to get him that stuff if I can't go outside? He can't go outside. I can't leave him here. I don't know anybody to ask to come and babysit. What am I going to do? God put the people in place for that. People would go stop at the store on their way home from work and drop stuff off. That's how I got through. God always has a plan, even though you don't know it. He's not going to always reveal it to you, but He's got a plan. They wanted me to come back to work. I believe it was like 2 or 3 weeks after my baby had been released from intensive care. I was like, I can't leave him now. I can't leave him. I didn't know what to do. I needed the job in order to take care of him. I needed the money to take care of him, but I wasn't. He wasn't ready for me to go back. He needed too much that I had to give him. I couldn't hire anybody to do the stuff at the time that he needed done. And so I'm sorry about that light back there, sunlight. But and so again, God made a way. I went to his no, I went to my doctor and told him my situation. He said, fine, no problem. I can write a note to your employer to let them know that you're still not well enough to return to work, and we'll give you another month. That's nothing but God. All of that was nothing but God. He put everything in place to make sure my baby and I were blessed and highly favored, because that's all that was. I took him to his first pediatrician. No, let me back up. When he was first released to the hospital from the hospital, I had to take him to a vision specialist because he had torn the retina in his right eye coming out of the birth canal. And it was bleeding. His right eye was just full of blood. So I had to take him to the eye specialist. It was about like 2 or 3 days after I had taken him home. That was an awful experience. That was an awful experience. If I could have punched that doctor without getting into legal trouble, I would have. He held my baby down on that table. Mind you, he's a newborn. Held him down on that table, and he used one of those wire things that looks like, for the women, it looks like one of those things that you use to, when you hold your eyes open, you stick it down in your eyes to hold them open so you can put your mascara on or whatever. That's what it looked like. And he put that down in my baby's eye, and he was screaming and crying. So of course I started crying. I was like, okay, just let me hold him. Can you stop for just a minute? Oh, he's okay. It's just gonna be uncomfortable for just a minute. I was like, let me poke that down in your eye and see if it's not uncomfortable for you. He's a newborn. Surely you have something less aggressive, less invasive for a baby. He wasn't listening to me. So I was like, look, you got about 5 seconds to take all that out and off of him. We go. You got 5 seconds to get all that off of him because I'm leaving with my baby. And he said, well, we're not done the exam. I said, oh, yeah, you're done. You're done. If this is the only way you know how to do it, and he's screaming and crying like that, that looks painful. I can only imagine how it feels. We're done. So he took all the stuff off of him. I took Isaiah home. I had to calm him down, of course, because he was just hysterical. But I calmed him down, and I found another doctor who did the same procedure, but it was totally different, totally less invasive. Totally less invasive. So, and then, of course, every doctor we went to had to be a specialist who dealt with preemie babies. And unfortunately, not all pediatricians do that. Little did I know that. So his first vision appointment was with a specialist. His pediatric appointment was with a specialist. When I took him to his first pediatrician appointment, they acted like I brought the baby Jesus in the office. Oh, the preemie is here. Oh, so I took him. He had his appointment. And one of the first things she said to me was that because he was so underweight and he was born so early, he's considered what they call a very low birth weight preemie. Because of those two factors, he will more than likely have developmental delays, meaning issues in his development as a child, in his brain and in his body, physically and mentally, in other words. And so I didn't know exactly what that meant. I was like, okay, well, I'll figure it out. I'm going to do what I got to do. And I started seeing those delays as he was getting older and growing as a baby. Excuse me, there's a certain age where they start trying to crawl, where they start trying to pull themselves up and move around, trying to balance themselves and try to walk and all that kind of stuff. He was delayed in all of that stuff because it's like he couldn't do it. It's like he didn't have the cognitive ability to tell him, to roll himself over, push himself up. I had to physically get down on the floor and show him how to do all those things. When he would pull himself up on something, he didn't know how to let it go and fall on his bottom. He would fall, boom, straight back like that. I was terrified. I was on the phone calling the pediatrician. Excuse me, he's gonna kill himself and gonna bust his head open. He's just falling back like a tree. She was like, "You're gonna have to teach him." I was like, "What do you mean I have to teach him? He's a baby. Don't these things come naturally?" She's like, "You forget he's a preemie. His brain has not matured. It's delayed. You're going to have to teach him." And so I did. He ended up needing glasses at 3 months old because of his torn retina. Of course, they like, we don't make glasses for 3-month-old babies. You can bring them back in about a year. No, the doctor said he needs them now. We can't wait a year. Well, the earliest we could probably do it'd be 6 months. No, that's another 3 months from now. No, he needs them now. So again, God worked it out, and I found an obstetrician who was able to create the glasses for him. And so the frames had to be specially made to fit his face, and then the glass had a special formula in it for his right eye. Because of the tear, his right eye is now a different shape than the left eye, which also means that he's seeing things in two different ways, and the brain is processing in two different ways. But the brain cannot process two things at the same time, so it chooses to ignore one. His brain chose to ignore his right eye, so everything he was seeing was through the left eye. But again, that left eye was also faulty. That's a lot. It was a lot. He had to have special formula. He had to be fed every 2 hours, and I mean every 2 hours around the clock. No putting him to bed at 6 or 7 and letting him sleep through the night. No, I had to wake him up and feed him every 2 hours. It was a lot. And I was not happy with God's decision for me to be doing this as a single mom. I was not happy at all. Sperm donor daddy, he's off just living his life, and I got to deal with all this. Why? I had to have that discussion with God because you can't take that out on the baby. That's not the baby's fault. The baby didn't ask for that. And we had some conversations, me and God. But I was still obedient. I did what he asked me to. I wasn't happy, but I did it. But God gave me all the assistance and the help that I needed. When he went to preschool, I started noticing that he had difficulty um, like switching over to new things. Like if he got used to a teacher, if another teacher came in, he was having difficulty. And they would see a difference in his behavior, a radical difference in his behavior. But I knew my child. He's not normally like that. So I knew something was going on at the daycare. Of course, the daycare is going to put it on you. Is there something going on at home? No, because he's not having these issues at home. He doesn't do this at home. So there's something going on here. And I had to keep questioning and ask them, what's going on here? Did something change? Well, yeah, the teacher we had in his class had to go to another class, and so he's got a new teacher. I was like, well, that's what's going on. That's what's wrong. And they didn't understand why that was a big deal for him. I didn't know either, but I knew it was a big deal. I said, that's it. That's a big deal. That's an issue for him. He's not able to handle the change. Well, we change rooms and teachers all the time and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, okay. But yeah, he's having trouble with it. Can you put him in her new class? No, they ended up moving him to his new, and he did fine. He did well. He flourished, and because he would do very well in daycare. They never had any trouble with him except when they kept moving this teacher. So one day they called me, and he was just off charts. And I was like, okay, again, what's going on at the daycare? Of course, they said nothing. Da 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 da. And it took a week before I finally found out that the teacher had left the daycare to start her own home daycare. I was like, why didn't anybody tell me that? I've been asking you all what's going on at the daycare, and you kept saying nothing. Well, teachers come and go all the time. It's not a big deal. I said, again, it's a big deal to this kid. And so I found out where she was, got in touch with her, and he ended up going to her home daycare. He did beautifully. Did beautifully. There were some things that she would notice too, but she was trained with special needs, and so she knew how to handle it. He got to kindergarten, first or second week, getting notices and emails from the teacher already. I was like, it's kindergarten. Are you kidding me? He was a busybody, couldn't stay in his seat, wasn't finishing his schoolwork, yada, yada, yada. So I go in, talk to the kindergarten teacher, and she has an ADHD kid. And she's ADHD. So she knew what she was looking at. And she told me, I think your son might have ADHD. What is that? She said, well, those are the symptoms that I'm seeing. He's hyper focused. He cannot be still. He's always got to be moving. Me. I said, what? And kindergartners do? She's like, no, he's way above the normal, regular. He's not able to calm himself at all. He's smart, but he's just not getting his work done because he can't keep himself still. I was like, okay. She's like, so take him to the pediatrician and let them confirm, and then they can refer you to a specialist and they'll run some tests. So I did that, done, boom. Yes, he has ADHD. I was like, okay, fine. So I did my research, found out exactly what I was dealing with, how to help him at home, how to get help for him at school. And baby, little did I know that the help I thought I was going to get from school, uh-uh, mm-mm, mm-mm. You see my face? Mm-mm, mm-mm. They weren't trying to help. They were not trying to help. Their idea of help was keeping him in from recess so he could get whatever missed work he had done. Whatever work he had missed, he had to do it during recess. So he was missing recess almost every day. I didn't find this out until we went to our first IEP meeting where I requested to get him an IEP so he could get some help, some accommodations put in place. And of course, they told me from day one, oh, no, he's too smart. He's making good grades and he's da 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 da. But yeah, all these comments I keep getting every day, telling me otherwise. Oh, well, then, that's just a behavior thing. That you can work on that at home. Why? I don't have any problems with his behavior at home. And so that went on for 12 years. Same story. Same exact story. story. He's struggling in school, all these comments back and forth from the teacher. Ask for an IEP, no. Get a 504, and it's half of what you need. Come to find out that the school's not following it, but you didn't know that because, hey, you wouldn't expect him to get accommodations from the school and they not do it. I didn't find that out until middle school that they weren't following his 504. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Don't they have to follow it? Nope. No, they don't. You see my face? No, they don't have to. You, as a parent, have to go and check and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. Because your child, a lot of times, doesn't understand their rights. It's the school's responsibility to tell them what their rights are in the classroom, but they don't. They don't. And so I told this story to say that even from the beginning, all the way up, there were struggles, yes. There were difficulties, yes. I learned all I could about ADHD in children, but had no idea that I had ADHD myself. ADHD is highly hereditary, so if your child has it, either mama or daddy has it. If you look back at your life and compare it to things that you see your child doing, I guarantee you, you're going to see some similarities. I don't care how successful you are in your job. I don't care that you're CEO of a company. I don't care that you're an entrepreneur. I don't care about any of that. You can have ADHD and still be successful in that lane because that's something you're interested in, and we tend to do very well in things that we're interested in. We struggle when it's something that we're not interested in, or that's boring, or we don't like it, or it's too many steps, too complicated, doesn't make sense. That's when you see the ADHD symptoms really kick in, and it shows up in our behavior. So that kid who's acting out in class, that's not a bad kid. Something's going on. ADHD symptoms take place up here in your frontal lobe through your executive function skills. If there's a deficiency there, it's going to show up in your behavior. It's not a physical symptom that you can see, like heart or stroke or has diabetes. All that shows up physically. If somebody has Tourette's, that shows up physically. ADHD doesn't show up physically. It shows up physically, behavior wise, not as a physical trait. It's a behavior that stems from the cognitive. Okay, it's a brain thing. It starts in the brain. There's a deficiency in neurotransmitters in the brain. The connections are not being made, so they don't have that executive skill to do whatever it is that they're not doing. That's why we are so forgetful. That's why we can repeat the same mistakes over and because we forgot the consequences. That's why punishment doesn't work. They forget the consequences. They forgot why they got in trouble. I told that story to hopefully help somebody understand what they're dealing with. I know it's frustrating, but you can do it. God brought me through it and He'll bring you through it. You've got to learn all you can about ADHD in children and in adults. You've got to learn and understand what it is you're dealing with. You can't help him or her with anything if you don't understand fully what you're dealing with. You can't get the teachers to help him or her if you don't know first what you're dealing with. How are you going to explain it to them? Because trust me, you're going to have to explain it to them. They don't fully understand ADHD, and they definitely don't understand how ADHD shows up in their class, even in the daycare. They don't understand. They really don't. They're not specifically trained. That's not their specialty area of training. You are going to have to educate the educators. And sometimes you're going to have to educate the professionals, the doctors, the psychiatrist, the therapist, the ADHD. No, not the ADHD coach. They got it. You. Yes, you, mama. And you can do it. It's for your baby. Your baby. I would walk through the fires of hell for my son. And he's 19, and I would still do that for him. Why? Because God gave him to me. He's my responsibility. I don't know for how long, but he's my responsibility. So I got to do what I got to do that job that God has tasked me with. I'm not saying I've always got it right, but I'm doing it. I'm all but I back up. I mess up, but I keep trying. There are babies. They need us. They're not able to say, hey, I need help. Hey, I'm not able to do this. Hey, I'm struggling in school. They're not able to say that, or they're too afraid. They don't feel safe to say that. My son was being bullied in school for wearing glasses. He would never tell me that. He would just come home and say, Mom, can I please have contacts? Can we please get contacts? Please. But he wouldn't say, I'm being bullied in school every day because I'm wearing glasses. I didn't find that out for a year later, again in one of our 504 meetings. I'm like, why didn't you all tell me this last year when it was going on? And of course they were, well, we dealt with it. Really? Really? So again, we got to know what we're dealing with. ADHD is real. ADHD is in Black children, Black girls, Black women, Black communities. It is real. It's a struggle. Yes, it shows up as behavior, but it's not bad behavior. There is something going on. Find out what's going on before you start judging. I hope that this message has blessed somebody. I hope it has given somebody an aha moment. Oh, yeah, that's what I do. Oh, yeah, I struggle with that. Oh, yeah, that makes sense now. I hope that is what this message has done for somebody. If you would like to talk to me further, just want to have a one on one conversation, reach out to me at adhdcutie@gmail.com. That's adhdcutie@gmail.com. And I'll send you the link for my free 30-minute session. And we can just have a conversation about whatever you want to talk about, your ADHD kid or your own ADHD. I hope to hear from you soon. God bless. Have a good Sunday, everybody.